Today, we're in for more fascinating discoveries. In our first session, experts from Russia, Norway, and the United States will explore a topic that's become increasingly urgent. What role will the Arctic play in international security and stability? Will nations work together to deal with new conditions, or will their interests diverge? I think their interests will diverge, but can they work together? The Arctic 8 nations have varying perceptions of what constitutes national security, and their foreign policies reflect these different views. As ice melts, the location of borders could matter more. How Arctic nations choose to encourage development matters a lot. Sea lanes open to more vessels. We've heard something about that, but who's responsible for instance, safety and rescue if something goes awry? Who can conduct military exercises? Should nations that have no Arctic or Arctic adjacent territory have equal access to sea passages or equal opportunity to conduct research? China, Japan, South Korea are just a few of the nations looking for an expanded role in this region. Governance of this has been, from the outside looking in, almost low key, but as we learned yesterday, pretty effective. But many argue it is now time to update existing agreements among Arctic neighbors and to consider new rules that might apply to non-Arctic nations. Our first speaker today is Thomas Nilsen, a journalist in Kirkenes, Norway, where he's editor of an independent news organization that reaches an audience across the border into the Arctic region of Russia, a longtime observer of the relations between Russia and the Nordic nations. The work of his team is amazingly comprehensive. I've gotten to become acquainted with this in recent weeks in preparation for the conference. It's an amazing news site. Mr. Nilsen will address the question of how Arctic nations manage their sometimes sensitive relations with one another. Speaking to us from Kirkenes, his topic is an Arctic power play amid growing mistrust, rearmament, and climate crisis. Thomas, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, David. It's an honor for me to speak to you all in North America, in Europe, in Asia. I'm sitting here at my office in Kirkenes in the late afternoon. I had a wonderful Arctic day from here inside the Arctic Circle. It's minus 24 degrees Celsius. That is 11 degrees minus Fahrenheit outdoor. And a beautiful winter day up here in the north. From my newsroom here, the Barents Observer, I have a 10-minute drive to the east, and then I'm at the border to Russia. I have a half-an-hour drive to the south, and then I'm at the border to Finland, and by that, the European Union. And normally I have about 1 hour by boat, and I'm out in the open Barents Sea, which is the southern part of the Arctic Ocean. But this winter, it might take much longer because it has been so cold over the last few weeks that it is actually frozen many tens of kilometers out from this city. But more importantly, my location and the goal of the Barents Observer is to be a civilian media radar here in the border area. It is less than 90 kilometers from the Barents Observer Kirkenes office to the nearest nuclear-powered submarine bases of Russia's Northern Fleet. That is about 55 miles in distance, which is actually very close. And it's not only one nuclear-powered submarine base, it's the entire Russian Northern Fleet is in a driving distance of 2-3 hours from this area bordering between Norway and Russia. And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit today. It's how Norway is balancing being a neighbor to a big power, Russia, and at the same time being a NATO member and trying to balance deterrence and reassurance. At the same time, we see that the Nordic military cooperation is strengthening, although Sweden and Finland are not NATO members. But in this current security picture of Northern Europe, it is quite logical that Norway, Sweden, and Finland work together. There are becoming more and more tight agreements on sharing military hardware, and also the thinking of cross-border training exercises and so on. And military conflict in this part of Europe will not only involve Norway, or it will not only involve Finland, but an attack or a conflict in one of those countries will automatically have a spillover for the others. So, but looking at the Barents Sea out from northern Norway right now, as we are speaking, if the audience, if you want to check, go into vesselfinder.com or marinetraffic.com, you will see that there is a huge area, a square, in between mainland Norway and the southernmost part of the Svalbard archipelago with the Bear Island that is currently closed off for civilian fishing vessels. And that's because this week, it started on Friday and it's lasting until Wednesday next week, Russia has announced missile shooting into that particular area. It's Norwegian exclusive economical zone, but it is international waters, so Russia have all the rights to do so. But for us sitting here on the coast, it is not exactly what we would call a friendly neighborhood gesture. Why is Russia doing that? Well, it is expected that either later on tonight or early next week, for the first time in post-Cold War history, four aircrafts, American strategic bombers B-1, will be, for the first time, deployed to Ørland Air Base in Norway. That is, when talking about geography, that is 1,200 kilometers away from the Russian border. It's in southern Norway. That is some 750 miles. The act. And the rhetorics we see in Russia right now is that NATO is coming closer to Russia's borders. So although it's a long way from the border, Russia don't like it. And this missile shooting they have announced this week in the Barents Sea is most likely a direct signal to Norway that they dislike the American presence in the area. And this has been a path that we have seen since 2016, 2017, that Russia is escalating with missile shootings in Norway's economical zone, the 200 nautical miles area, international waters. And we have seen more NATO presence in northern waters. Last summer, for instance, was the first time a group of British and US naval vessels sailed into the Barents Sea. First time since the Cold War. Then talking about surface vessels, of course, there are submarines under the surface that we don't see, but we know they are there. So in between that, Norway is squeezed. What should we do? We are good NATO members. We depend on NATO for our own security. But at the same time, we have a neighbor that will continue to be our neighbor, and we have to balance it with good neighboring relations. So one thing Norway have done in that perspective is to say that NATO allies should not exercise very close to the border to Russia's Kola Peninsula in the high north. So they are, these American aircrafts are flying out in the Norwegian Ocean and staying quite far away from the Russian border in order to give Russia better time, better warning time in case of escalations. That cannot be said the other way around. The nearest submarine base, as I said in the beginning, is only 90 kilometers away from the Norwegian area. But it is important to understand, talking about Russia's security, that this is Russia's access to open waters, ice-free waters. This is the Russian Northern Fleet, the main fleet of the Russian Navy, access to the North Atlantic. The other fleets of Russia, the Baltic fleet, has to sail in between Denmark and Sweden to get out in open waters, very easy to stop. And the Black Sea fleet have to sail through the Bosporus, very easy to stop before going out to the Mediterranean in a conflict. But up here in the north, it is free access. And this is important because I see many of my colleagues, I'm a reporter, many of my colleagues, they say that there is a rearmament. Russia is arming the Arctic because of protecting the natural resources, protecting the new seaways that are opening up. That is not the main argument for the rearmament we see right now. It is big geopolitics, the relations, the tensions between NATO and Russia. That is the main reason for Russia to build more submarines, are sailing more active in the Barents Sea, in the Arctic Oceans, and also the Western Arctic bases on the islands of Franz Josef Land and Novaya Zemlya to secure their own vessels access to free oceans. This is the current situation. It's the escalations that we see, and it is a bit scary. To be witnessing it. Also important to notice is Russia's testing of new weapons up here. Of course, the worst scenario is an open conflict. But for us as neighbors in the border area, the testing and development of these new weapons is a major reason for concern. And here we are talking about especially the nuclear-powered underwater drone, the so-called Poseidon drone, and a nuclear-powered cruise missile that they are testing in northern waters. And a cruise missile powered by a small nuclear reactor. During a test in the summer of 2019, the weapon exploded and caused a spike in radiation in the White Sea area. So not only our concern for a conflict, which hopefully never will be here, but it's also important to remember that Russia are using these huge Arctic areas for testing and development of new weaponry, because there are no neighbors there. There are very little population. So those weapons that can't be tested other places in other waters of the Russian Navy, Black Sea, in the Baltics, etc., are tested up here in the north. I would also like to point to you a few very positive developments that we see in the border area. So, like during the Cold War, Norway has a special relation to Russia. We have a fishery agreement with the stocks of cod, Arctic cod, in the Barents Sea that are jointly managed between Norway and Russia. And this is the best managed resources of marine resources on any world ocean. It's very healthy, and it's very, very good for both European, Norwegian, and Russian economy. And this goes on even in times of closed borders due to coronavirus, even in times of international geopolitical tensions. These meetings between Norway and Russia on the fisheries are very positive. We are cooperating on environmental issues, and we are cooperating on search and rescue. As a journalist, I was out here in the Barents Sea on a joint Norwegian-Russian search and rescue exercise 1.5 years ago, before coronavirus. And it is amazing to see how uniformed people are working together to solve a task, all through the political tensions between Washington, D.C., Moscow, Oslo, Brussels are called. When you see those people working together out in the open ocean to in a common search for people missing at sea, for oil spill preparedness and so on, they don't think about big politics. They are there to solve an issue, and that's good. And that is a highlight. It is good to see that NATO uniforms and Russian uniforms can work together even in times like this. Another thing, the geopolitical changes, so looking at the map from the top of the world, is giving us new neighbors. I looked not towards the Arctic, but from the Arctic and at the map. And actually here from my town, it is closer in distance over to the northern archipelagos of Canada, the Ellesmere Island, than it is further south in Europe to Italy, for instance. It's much closer over to Canada. So we are getting a new neighbor as the ice is melting. And that we saw a quite unique cooperation on security issues last fall before Christmas, when due to the engine failure with the American icebreaker sailing out of Alaska, they asked Norway for help. So the Norwegian Coast Guard vessel called Svalbard sailed over to the waters of the Beaufort Sea to recover some scientific instruments that are collecting temperature measures of the Arctic Ocean. So the Arctic is not dividing the different countries in the north. It's becoming more and more connecting us. And that are some of the very good cooperations we see. So we think that all true, there is a lot of focus on rearmament of the Arctic. The Arctic is both seen from Russia and from the Nordic countries, an area of rather low. There are no rules that need to be rewritten, seen from Europe and Russia. So, but we can come back to that in the question and answer session with David. But first, let's listen to the two other speakers this morning.